Hi, everyone. Welcome to the virtual Clubhouse. I'm Alicia Greenberg with the Advertising Club of New York. On behalf of the club and our partner company, Perksy, thanks for joining us today for another installment of our Inside the Clubhouse series. And today we're going to be talking about millennials and Gen Z in the age of COVID-19. We first had this conversation over a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic when Perksy brought insights then, but we have new insights and it's a really important topic. So we thought timely to bring it back. And we have marketers with us today from Angry Butterfly, Gofundme, and Edgewell Personal Care to have that conversation. But before we get to that, two quick reminders. Tomorrow, we're having another great conversation on the future of work. I'm sure we all want to know what that's going to look like. And we'll be doing that with our partner company, Cassandra, and with marketers from Voya and Engine, JetBlue, and Nielsen. And next week, next Thursday, July 29th, we are getting together in person and we hope you can be with us because we're celebrating our 125th anniversary. And our members, we're going to be doing a time capsule, and we're also going to be introducing some new board members. And we're going to be doing that at the Midtown Loft. So we hope we can see you there and raise a glass together. All of this information can be found on our website, theadvertisingclub.org. And we encourage those of you who aren't members to join us. We have so many great things going on. I'd love to have a conversation with you. So write to me, Alicia at theadvertisingclub.org. So now it's my pleasure to hand it off to our partner from Perksy, Jamie Pete, to take you through some great insights. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alicia. I'm just going to pull up my presentation here. Great. So as Alicia said, my name is Jamie Pete. I'm the SVP of Client Development here at Perksy. I'm going to walk through some quick data with you guys, and then hopefully the panel will have some great discussion about some of the key data points that we walk through here. The research objectives were really around getting an understanding of the current state of the nation among millennials and Gen Z, which is the same audiences we talked to last year in April. We wanted to get a sense of whether these changes, what they were, and whether there were indicators on whether they were long-lasting or temporary changes. So we've got some great data on that front that we'll talk about today. Last year, we did a US-only study. 2021, we included Canada in this. If we're looking at data year over year, we've removed the Canadian data, so it's US apples to apples. So anytime you see 2020 versus 2021, it's US only. Same gender and age splits as previously. We are a mobile-only company. Everyone answered through the Perksy app on their mobile device. We're going to set the stage here with a little bit of consumer mindset around employment status and just generally how people are feeling. There's been some major lifestyle changes over the past year, moving and relocating, usually out of larger cities to smaller locales, changing career paths and going back to school. We're kind of headlining and leading the way in terms of big changes that have happened with a lot of consumers during this time. We dived into the moving and relocation a little bit further. And these seem to be permanent moves by and large. Almost 3/4 of the people that have relocated have said that they're not moving back. If we kind of match this up and align it with some data from the Wall Street Journal, nationwide, they've noted that relocations to mid-size and small metro areas from big cities rose 23%. So really in line with what we're seeing here, talking to our consumers. Employment is rebounding. It was a pretty grim situation when we were delivering the data last year. A lot of people had been laid off or had their hours reduced at 46% in the light blue bar. The dark blue bars is 2021. We can see that that number is actually about halved since early 2020. So things are opening up, obviously. There's more optimism and, as vaccinations take hold, et cetera, the economy is getting better. We also asked people about their kind of work situation, which statement best describes the intended work location for this year and in 2022. What we're seeing is that 42% of people are currently working in person. This is kind of macro data, so these could be service jobs, et cetera, but we do see that this is going to jump to about 55% claimed working in person by 2022. Of note, I think on this slide is a really interesting data point. The pink 15% here are people that started working remotely during COVID-19 only, but they're planning on continuing to do that. So that's a rather large change to the economy and how people live their lives and work that can have a lot of different implications, I think. Which of the following are you most concerned about after the pandemic has passed? Again, we've got light blue and dark blue 2020 versus 2021. Economic recovery is still kind of a key thing that people are concerned about. That has dropped, though, again, as things have progressed and there's been some development, that's less of a concern than it was. What we're seeing is that there are continued health crisis concerns, though. So COVID-19 coming back, there's a bit of a dip in that, but still 37%, but also a new pandemic coming through. So this has really going to change some people's perspective and got some more concerns top of mind related to these types of crises happening. And maybe that dampens some of the rebound that we're seeing to some extent. We did want to get some data quickly on our sample around who's been vaccinated. So this is blended data between Canada and the US, 69% saying they've received a vaccine. We asked those people then, do they feel comfortable being around non-vaccinated people? And it's interesting data here. Almost half saying, yeah, I'm comfortable, but more than half, just over half saying I'm either not comfortable or I'm not sure. And again, I think there are implications for businesses, retail environments and companies, et cetera, on how this all plays out. And I think there's a lot more to the story in the coming months as we kind of progress down this path. Over 50% of people, or roughly 50%, think that public regulation should require vaccinations in public social spaces like restaurants, movie theaters, sporting events, et cetera. Same thing with travel, airlines, transportation, trains, subways, et cetera. And then college campuses are the light blue bars on the end. So really the data is pretty consistent across there, about half thinking that there should be a requirement for vaccinations. A good portion, though, a third saying, no, there shouldn't be a requirement for that. And then again, some people not quite sure where they stand on that front. That is going to be a kind of key thing as the summer progresses into fall. What are people most looking forward to after the pandemic has passed? Well, socializing is certainly still kind of a key thing that people want to do more of. So seeing their friends, social activities with larger groups of people, seeing family, et cetera. Travel is the single biggest thing now, though, that people are looking forward to. And I think we can all kind of feel the same way here after being trapped and locked down for a long time. So 71% of people are saying they're looking forward to some kind of travel. We'll dive into travel a bit more deeply in the next slide or two, but also really on this entertainment aspect, sure, going to the movies has definitely seen an uptick, but I think concerts as well, whereas you may not have missed this type of activity if you're a concert goer a couple months into this, not knowing when it was going to end, but 18 months in, we know that this can have a really positive impact on how people enjoy themselves. And that's almost doubled. So 50% of people now saying that they're really looking forward to that. Diving into travel a bit more deeply, we're going to look at domestic travel here versus international travel on the right. And we've, again, looking at the rest of this year, 2021 in light green and 2022 in dark green. So we asked, how comfortable do you feel traveling domestic in the remainder of this year and into next year? 2/3 are actually feeling pretty comfortable now with domestic travel. That jumps to 80% for 2022. So really feeling that things are going to open up and get better. People are a little bit more wary of international travel at the moment. So only 43% of people saying they're either very or somewhat comfortable, very comfortable or comfortable with international travel. That does jump quite a bit to 70% for 2022. So again, maybe not off as much to a quick start. There's a little bit more concern right now as it relates to leaving the country. Last year, we asked kind of what new things have you picked up? And there were a lot of interesting activities that people started picking up to take their time up. This year, we asked, what new activities did you start that you're going to continue once things change? I think some big implications here, especially for CPG companies. Some cooking is a huge one at almost 40%. It leads the way. But also things like in-home exercising. People have made investments here. They've bought a Peloton or they've bought weights to use at home. They're realizing that they're pretty comfortable working at home after they've made that investment. So a lot of these people are going to continue doing that. There's a big uptick in video games as well. We'll see some mobile data. People are using their phones a lot more than they did pre-pandemic. So those are some nice data points as well. For anyone interested as well in breaking this out, US versus Canada, et cetera, I do encourage you to follow up with this after the presentation. There won't be enough time for me to go into those splits today before handing it off to the panel for discussion, but happy to engage after the fact. So here's what I just alluded to. 74% of people are spending a lot more time on their phones. It's interesting. I just saw some really cool corroborating data point, maybe not corroborating, but implications related to this number. 50% more mobile ad fraud and video happening as well since the pandemic has started. So that's a huge increase as people are spending more time on their phones, brands are following them, more digital campaigns, et cetera. And fraud has been a bit of an issue there. So that's going to be something that brands and agencies have to be conscious of and work out. Final section here, folks, is purchase behavior, and I think some really interesting data to talk about. We noted last year that there was some brand switching happening early on, and it was pretty significant. At almost 2/3 of people said they were buying different brands, some different brands, or many different brands. That's only increased since that data point last April. And when we ask whether people are likely to continue buying these new essential item brands that they used, over 70% are saying that they're definitely or probably going to continue buying these brands. They weren't quite so sure early on, right? In the early days, it was about 40% or closer to that level. And people were on the fence, might or might not. Now they've had more experience. They've used a brand for that amount of time, maybe satisfied their needs. And we're looking at some permanent switches here from pre-pandemic levels. And there's the drivers of these switches have changed a lot. I mean, early on, people probably weren't sure because they were buying whatever was on the shelf. I mean, we all can probably recall going in and finding empty shelves. So I'm buying whatever's available when I shop. They said my normal brands were out of stock. That was the availability was the biggest thing. Net, I was 80%, dropped to 56%. Now people are saying, I'm just browsing more. That's up at 49%. I'm buying brands that are less expensive. I traded down from a cost perspective. These brands are now satisfying my needs. I'm going to stick with some of those brands that are doing just as good of a job. Also, they talk about the COVID-19 that people put on during COVID-19. I'm probably beating that a little bit with COVID-20 maybe, but 43% of people saying they're buying healthier now. And I think a lot of people are looking to get back on track from that perspective moving forward here. Final data point, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what else people are doing with their money. And this is from a donations perspective. We didn't see a ton of changes over the course of the pandemic. So since and before the pandemic, at least in claimed behavior in terms of donating money. I know anecdotally, some people who did suffer some either being laid off, furloughs, or wage reductions did say that some timing of being asked for donations early on when that happened was a little off, but by and large on a macro level, it's pretty similar. So it'll be interesting to hear some conversation maybe on that today from Musa. Wrap it up for you, some key points here. Major lifestyle changes have occurred among these audiences, these younger audiences, leaving cities, changing careers, going back to school. Half of our audience continue to have concerns that are health related, either COVID coming back or new pandemic emerging. And requiring vaccination in public spaces is a contentious issue. There's about 1/3 of people saying that shouldn't be the case. Many consumers are going to continue these new activities they've started. So again, big implications for CPG. Cooking is a huge activity that people are going to continue doing, in-home exercise, video games, etc. Mobile use has skyrocketed over the course of the pandemic. So these digital campaigns and reaching consumers where they're living more now will be key for brands and agencies. And brand switching observed earlier accelerated. So that was the last thing that we finished with. And a lot of people are satisfied with some of these new brands that they've moved to and are going to continue using them. So big implications there. So hopefully I'm not over time. I'm going to hand this over to Nadia and the panel now. She'll make introductions. Thanks so much.
Thank you for that, Jamie. Hello, everyone. My name is Nadia Massry. I am the founder and CEO of Perksy. Because we're so used to what we do, I realized that we kind of forgot to introduce ourselves properly. Perksy is a next-gen consumer insights platform. We power real-time research with everyday consumers, and we do that through an immersive and gamified mobile app that rewards people for participating in research. So how we help our clients, mostly brands, agencies of all sizes, is, they come to us and they leverage our platform, which is really bespoke to create these research campaigns to help them better understand their audiences. We do what we call life cycle insights, which means that we can start with concept testing, market exploration, and go all the way to brand tracking, in-store satisfaction. We can do task-based research. So we're both quantitative and qualitative. And the really great thing about the way that we're conducting research today is we thought that mobile was the right way to go about doing this. Today, consumers are spending the majority of their time on their mobile phones, and they expect really high quality mobile experiences. And that's what we bring with Perksy. And that's enabled us through a really fantastic user experience to generate better insights because we have higher engagement. So our audience's response rate is upwards of 80%, and that's within 6 hours of a user receiving a push notification. We're nationally representative, statistically significant for all of those on the call who are like, I need her to say that in order to buy into this. And our recontact rates are about 91%. So because we own our own audience and we grow it, we manage it, you can continue to talk to people over time, which is really, really useful. That's why it was really great to produce this research, because it's a follow-up to the research that we saw last year. So thank you so much, Jamie, for those awesome insights. And I am very much looking forward to introducing my fellow, I guess I'm not a panelist, I'm a moderator. So the panelists that will be joining us today. So feel free to hop on your videos here so that I can pull you in. But we have Musa Tariq, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Gofundme. He was Gofundme is currently a client. Actually, all of these folks are currently our customers, and was also a customer with us when he was at Airbnb. Joy Rudd, who's Senior Business Manager of Global Growth Innovation at Edgewell Personal Care, also a wonderful customer of ours, and Graham Candy, who has an awesome name, Partner and Chief Strategy Officer at Angry Butterfly, which is another really awesome name. So thank you so much to the three of you for joining us today. I'm excited to talk about some things. Welcome.
Hi, Nadia.
Thank you. That's I was just hoping for like a hey, how's it going? Yo, what up, girl? So today, I think we have a few things that we want to go into from the data that's here. I think there are three core topics that we really want to touch upon. The first being sort of employment status and mindset. Second being consumer behaviors and activities, as well as purchase behavior. So the first one is around lifestyle changes. So, on slide 5, we saw that major lifestyle changes have occurred among millennials and Gen Z over the course of the pandemic, with many of them leaving cities, changing careers, and or going back to school. And this is a period of a lot of change for people that are going to have a lot of buying power in the coming year. So what do you think that the implications of this will be? I see an unmute coming, Graham. All right.
I can go.
Hit me.
I don't know. I think it's super fascinating because I think, all the clients we work with, every company around the world is basically trying to figure out what do we do now that things are seemingly going back to normal or normal-ish or whatever the definition is. So the data is super interesting because there's been a lot of lifestyle changes. I think Jamie was talking about video games and cooking and what was the other one? Exercise. Those are the ones that sort of come top of mind. And you think like, is this just was this a COVID thing? Is it going to go back to normal? Should we lean into it? Do we lean back into, do we lean away from all of the COVID stuff and do the things that some brands are doing and talk about celebrating normal again? And I think the data is super fascinating because we forget, I think that, we're like, we don't forget, but we're on like month 15 or 16 of this, right? And, all the studies out there about how long it takes to build habits, it's somewhere in the range of like 2 to 6 months. So for people who've kept with it, they've now been cooking at home for 16 months and exercising for 16 months and playing video games for 16 months. These aren't things that are just going to disappear. So that has major implications because I think like as a brand now, you get to kind of choose which side of the fence you're going to be on. You can like celebrate and reinforce those habits, or for maybe if you're you work in the travel industry or something, it's going to be about breaking free from all that stuff. So you get to make one of those choices, I think, based on that data. And I don't think brands should be hesitant to lean into those behaviors that people solidified during COVID.
I think that's a really good point. Just because everything that you read about habits, I'm one of those people who reads about habits, like atomic habits, and everything that you read it does really say that, it takes, 6 months to really lock in a habit. I wonder what that means for me, because I've stopped exercising and I don't know if that's my new habit, and that's kind of tragic. So I should probably try and restart that. But, I think it's true. I wonder if, aside from keeping these habits, I think sort of this concept of change is really interesting. And I think this is something I'd like to ask you about, Musa. But I do think that when the pandemic hit, and this is just my opinion from what I've seen and learned from in the data, I think when something like that hits, two things happen. People either revert to what makes them feel stable and secure, or they try to shake things up and they look for some sort of change, because doing that, kind of going with the change, gives them a new type of security. It makes them feel like they're moving with the flow, they're evolving with the changing circumstances, because the law of nature is, things change or they die. So I'm curious to hear from you, Musa. How do you think sort of this mindset of change is affecting consumers, or how might you think it affects consumers in either a positive or a negative way?
So I think generally, before I go too deep down, I can't wait for this new chapter in marketing, and I'll tell you why. There's been so much research out there about what happened after the Spanish flu, when people were in lockdown for the kind of the very first time, very similar to this. It was like there was a creative explosion that came out, and architecture change, design change, creative change. And being a marketer, I'm sure Graham and Joy can attest to this. Like, over the last couple of months, we've had to do things differently. Like, we've had to think about creative differently. We've had to think about production differently. And so I think there's a lot of creatives and artists who've been kind of locked up for so long, who've been thinking about great ideas, and I'm super excited in seeing all those ideas come out. I actually think September is going to be like a gold rush in creativity, marketing, and advertising. In fact, like, every agency I know, every media agency I know is so busy right now, because all those brands that have been kind of holding back from creating content have been holding back until things get back to normal, and now no one can wait. They've been holding on to budgets until September. So I think September is going to be crazy, and it's going to be fascinating to watch, to your point, which direction brands go, right? Do they reflect the time that we're in? Do they reflect the time that we've had previously, or do they reflect the time that we're moving forward in? And one thing that I know is, and there was an article about it recently as well, talking about the number of people who are quitting their jobs this year and next year, right? Like, we're seeing mass amounts of people. I think it was some crazy number. I've totally forgotten what the number was, but like some crazy amount of people who are quitting their jobs. And it's symbolic of the change that people want, right? The change that people need and desire. And so I think you're going to see some brands that will go out and act as if everything's normal, and I think they won't be successful. I think it's the brands that go out there and engage with consumers with the assumption that things have changed is going to be really interesting. And it can't be just about the, escaping from your house. Like, Orbit came along, and Orbit chewing gum, or extra chewing gum, came out and did that ad, which was fantastic, and it was really timely. And then there was someone else who did it 2 days later, and it was like, well, we've already seen that before. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how brands react. And it's actually as a challenge for us at Gofundme. It's like, right, if we want to go out with a campaign, which direction are we going in? And I think the other thing, Nadia, is that the change is so drastic from one day to the next, right? Like, how quickly do people adapt to, oh, we're back to normal now, let's just keep going, or we're still really living in the pandemic? And I think everyone's kind of different right now, which is fascinating.
Yeah. What's really interesting, and this is not something that was in my original agenda, but that's fun stuff to do and talk about. But something that's sort of been on my mind, and this sort of speaks to, actually, Musa, what triggered this is you talking about the advertising. And the first thing that I thought was, I give him help, only because I saw a GoFundMe billboard in the New York subway the other day. I remember snapping a photo and sending it your way, and it said, give them HEL, so like all one color, and then there was just a P at the end in a different color. And so I'm like, give them help. And I thought about it, and I realized that that's something, I think there's sort of this this concept of like togetherness and like wanting to help that's really showed up in my life. And I think we've seen this among consumers as well, but I think that change can come in very different ways. I think that, you know, instead of seeing a lot of, you know, sort of selfishness, I think instead we're seeing people show up for others. And I know for myself, I'm like, hey, like, what can I do for the community right now? Like, what is something that I can do? I just want to feel something. I want to feel like I'm doing something or participating in some way, shape, or form, because it's my way to sort of bring back this level of sort of like contribution, or feel like I'm doing something and helping here.
Nadia, you're not alone. Last year we had someone donate to a GoFundMe every second because people were feeling helpless and wanted to help other people. And I don't think that changes coming out of the pandemic. I think that people still recognize that, like, you need to be there for, in fact, like, it's an inherent human truth. Like, people need help and people want to help others. And that's kind of what GoFundMe does. But I don't think you're alone at all in feeling this desire of needing to help. But at the same time, Nadia, the flip side is that while you're there willing to help, a lot of people really struggled during this pandemic. And a lot of people actually were on the flip side who were unable to help people and needed help. And had to do a very difficult decision of asking for help, which is one of the most painful things that you can do. When you ask for help, you actually release chemicals in your body that are similar to being punched in the face. Asking for help is a very different thing, but yet when you do ask for help, you actually give people an opportunity to be kind, which makes you feel good as a person. And so it's a really interesting area. Yeah,
wow. I think, you know, we're seeing a lot of relocation too. So, you know, on slide 5, we also saw that many people have moved and 75% said they wouldn't be moving back. And, you know, instead of talking about that, I want to bridge that into the next thing that we saw on slide 7, which was sort of this new work from home group. So, you know, what do you think the impact will be? And Joy, I'm curious to get your opinion here. What do you think the impact of having an additional 15%, so like sort of like a minimum, but 15% of the population working exclusively remotely will be? So sort of, you know, adding this to the people that were already working remotely, now 1 in 4 people. So of every 4 people that we meet, 1 in 4 people will be doing so. So, you know, I'm curious to hear, you know, what are the plans for your companies regarding working remotely, and sort of what are your thoughts about that? Where some have 100% in office, some have hybrid models, and some are exclusively remote. I want to hear all your opinions on this, but Joy, let's kick off with you.
Yeah, sure. So I work at a company called Edgewell Personal Care. We're kind of a mid-sized CPG. And I think, you know, Edgewell has been great through the entire pandemic. They've been very supportive of all of us working from home, no issue. I believe in September, the expectation for the US offices is that everyone will be going back, but that no one is expected to be going back 100% of the time. Like, it'll never be like how it was before, which is just really interesting. I was actually hired by Edgewell during COVID. I was interviewed virtually only. I never met anyone in person. I've never been to the office before, the headquarters. I've met my supervisor in person maybe twice before. It was a really fascinating process. I'm permanently remote. I think that a company like Edgewell, although very forward thinking, might not have ever considered hiring, you know, sort of a core, you know, senior business manager. I'm heading up the new brand incubator at Edgewell. I would like to think it's a relatively crucial role to the company. I think in the past, it might not have been something that they would have considered hiring a permanently remote person who lives 2 hours from the nearest office. COVID sort of changed everything, and very quickly. I mean, I was hired June 1st of last year. So I think, you know, Edgewell has been great about really pivoting and evolving their thinking very quickly. And I think it's so fascinating that, you know, in September, no one is going to be expected to go back every day. I know that the priority for the company, and I am going to guess this is similar across many companies, it's going to be very important that the right people are together at the right times. Yeah. So, if I decide I'm going in Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the person that I need to interface with and have like meaningful interactions and do the type of work that we can't do remotely together, I need to make sure that my people are there on the same days that I'm going to be there. And so that's going to be, I think there's like some interesting, like really niche opportunities for like scheduling and making sure that the right people are together at the right time and sitting close to each other or having spaces to do that collaboration.
Yeah.
And one other thing I just wanted to mention, and we've talked about this, Nadia, I think, there's kind of this, one thing that you can really miss as someone who works remotely is this idea of serendipity and,
Yes.
random run-ins in the bathroom. I mean, that's where like
Chance
so
encounters.
much, yes, and so much of marketing and business in general is conducted like in passing in the hall. Hey, and I think that's one thing that I really do miss as someone who's permanently remote. I've been working remotely for 10 years. I think I have sort of had to evolve as a person. I'm feeling very chatty at the moment, but I'm actually an introvert. It takes a lot of effort for me to like get out there and like really, tap a senior leader on the shoulder and say, hey, I have this idea, or this is what we should really be doing. But as a remote worker, I've had to really kind of get over that and have sort of the bravery or whatever you want to call it to really step up, speak up and reach out and connect with the right people, because I'm not going to run into you in the bathroom. I have to kind of take the bull by the horns and create those interactions for myself, which it'll just be interesting to see if other people arrive at the same conclusion that I have and then start to kind of evolve their behaviors a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to a new topic, I did just want to cover this because I do think it's really important, and I'm sure there are a lot of brands and agencies that are on the line. And one thing that really sticks out for me is I care very deeply about company culture, and I think that it's very important, especially I just think about ourselves. We're a startup, we're growing really rapidly, and as we bring new folks onto the team, I think we have an obligation as a company to ensure that, we're establishing a culture at this stage that can scale so that when, as this company gets larger and larger, the right values and behaviors are instilled in the company. And I think it's an extremely critical thing. I think human beings are social animals. We require social interaction. I think some of the best work comes from collaboration. I got to see one of my LA employees today, the first time in like a year, yesterday, because he happens to be in Toronto and I happen to be in Toronto right now. And we were like, this is awesome. We spent 4 hours together and we came up with the greatest ideas. We got so much work done. And it's interesting because I think we've been thinking about productivity. We have seen, an increase in productivity, but my question is, at the expense of what? So, how are people's moods being affected? And, does that weigh into, why people might be leaving? So, I had my mom's 70th birthday was over the weekend, and met with all my cousins, and they said, I might leave my job. And I'm like, because we have to go back to the office. And I was like, is it because you have to go back to the office? He's like, well, no, I don't like my job really. And I'm like, okay, so then you have to do something in a job you don't necessarily like to then go back to the office. That makes sense. So I think people are sort of waking up to this reality that I'm not 100% where I want to be, and things can happen at any time. And I need to make sure that I feel good about who I am. I'm contributing to causes that I care about. I'm investing in myself in the way that matters, and I'm doing work that's important to me. And I'm curious to sort of just hear, Graham, even from yourself, I think, is this the kind of thing that you think is showing? Do you feel that companies should be addressing this in sort of their marketing and their comms? Should they be addressing the concept of like, we went through all of this together and now we want to make the right choices for ourselves and almost encourage this, like this personal growth journey?
Yeah, it's a great it's a great conversation. I mean, we built our entire agency in COVID. So we've never had an office.
Wow.
We've never been together. It's been very, in many ways, liberating. We have a art director that's in Egypt right now. We have people in BC and Ottawa and New York. We have one individual who's been working with us does rock climbing part-time and data analytics the rest of the time. And so they've just been driving around in their car doing rock climbing.
That's great.
And then doing, they're living the dream. They figured their life out, unlike the rest of us. So no, I think that it's something to lean into. I do think, yeah, the absolutist approaches will be challenging. Like I do think that there might be blowback, and I think that's a decision ultimately to be made on either side of complete flexibleness and more of the in-person culture. I actually think, like, looking at things like, I was watching a bunch of esports events on the weekend, and they just do a wonderful job of having all the digital engagement where it makes sense. The evenings, weekends, when people are off, and then every once in a while they have these key moments that bring everyone together, and they like really reinforce culture. So it's an interesting model that even something that's a completely digital culture brings people together in person for those key moments to reinforce bonds. And so I think even if you were to go almost like the complete online route, you have to have those moments of human connection. And if you're going to go pretty hard into the in-person route, giving people the freedom to feel very comfortable should they need to be able to work from home and things like that. Because I think it just goes back to your data. People just reinvented their lives over the past 16 months in a million different ways. And so your own workforce has reinvented their lives in many ways that you didn't get to choose. And so I think having a POV, but understanding the bend is going to be pretty critical, in my point. And yeah, could be interesting communications opportunity as well.
So one thing I want to jump to is consumer behavior and activities. I think Graham had a great point earlier. With folks doing all these new activities and for 17 months and things that have been entrenched in folks, and that brands can elevate for that at-home behavior is critical. So I have a question for our panelists here, for all of you. This is from an attendee, so I want to answer this live. Has there been any significant shifts, or have there been any significant shifts in your marketing spend and creative messaging in reaching younger audiences since the pandemic? And I guess specifically this is tailored to millennials and Gen Z. So I guess let's try to answer that way, but feel free to also answer generally if that's more applicable here. But Musa, you touched upon it a little bit earlier, and I'm curious to know if for you individually, there have been significant shifts in sort of how you're spending on marketing and how you're messaging creatively.
Yeah, interesting enough, there was a Gartner annual CMO spend survey that was announced today, which talked about budgets have fallen from 11% of a company's revenue to 6.4% of a company's revenue. So I think across the board, you were seeing budget cuts in some organizations. Again, I think it's very specific. Some organizations have had, have been very successful during COVID. And so I think there is this weird divide of some companies that have done really well, some companies that have kind of just scraped through. Personally, for GoFundMe, I think, we haven't really thought about Gen Z quite yet, because obviously, as you think about your own giving behavior, it's something that happens with age, and as your income tends to grow, that you feel like you have enough money. Now, Gen Z, as we know, are very supportive of doing the right things, supporting of causes.
Very mission driven.
Exactly, and then purpose driven, right? And so GoFundMe at its core is a very purpose driven company. So, we don't have a problem with awareness, but what we do see is that obviously with Gen Z, it's a lot harder for them to give some of their money to help others, whereas millennials are actually coming into that age now, even both kind of the elder millennials or whatever geriatric millennials or whatever I'm called these days, to kind of like a middle millennial. Like, they're getting to that point where they've established a place and a house, and they're starting to have kids, and now they're getting to that place where they're being a lot more altruistic, right? Feeling like they can support others. And so that's been really, really interesting. And I think that, for them, charity tends to has evolved and changed, right? Our parents' generations were very comfortable giving to charities. Like, they knew what charities they supported. But at the same time, there's been a lot of criticism of charities because they're actually very inefficient. So when you do give to a charity, a large amount of that money is going to admin costs and so on, whereas GoFundMe actually gives that money directly to the person. And so I think millennials are so used to having information at their hands because of the internet, they've grown up with Google, that they are also more aligned to wanting that level of transparency when they are giving money to charities. So, I I do think that we will spend a lot more money targeting millennials, more so than we will Gen Z at the moment. But again, it really depends on the type of brand you're focused on and working on. And so it will, I guess it will differ for everyone. But again, you know, remember when I definitely remember when millennials were emerging, and there was a transition. Like it took some time. There were some brands who jumped into it, right? Like if you're a Nike, you should be really focused on, like, Nike's core customer is a 17-year-old athlete, right? They should be very deep into Gen Z. But I think, you know, the learning there is that, you know, you target young because young is aspirational, right? We never really talk about this idea that actually targeting young people is aspirational. As we grow older, we aspire to follow trends of younger people. And so, you know, it will be, while we may not spend targeting Gen Z, it will definitely be important for us to really understand the behavior, because I think that behavior will then start to transcend into millennials too.
Awesome. Graham, what are your thoughts? Because I'd like to get your opinion on what you're seeing, you know, as an agency. So, you know, the question again being, you know, have there been significant shifts in, and I guess the way I'll structure it for you, you know, being an agency, have there been significant shifts in the way your clients are showing up or asking to sort of to message when it comes to creative, or the way they're looking to reach their target audience, specifically this younger audience of Millennial and Gen Z?
Yeah, there's 3 clients I think we're working with that are basically solely focused on we call them young millennial Gen Z. I think to Musa's point about the geriatric millennials being, you know, 38, 39 years old, that's not really in their mindset when they're imagining the audience they're talking to. So the core is sort of 18 to 24, which is the kind of borderlands of those 2 generations. And yeah, it was a bit of a, like always, it was like a slow curve to sort of nudging them to talk to people who are 18, 24, because the core consumer for so many categories is kind of the middle-aged individual with maybe a bit more disposable income. But I think they can see the wave coming. And so, yeah, I think this is really the first year for a lot of our clients that they became comfortable leaning into things like TikTok and having like very influencer-centric campaigns, getting on Twitch. Like it's kind of hit the mass recognition point where they're comfortable doing campaigns in those spaces, and are getting comfortable ceding a little bit of the messaging control and creative control to different players in the space. Certainly some of the influencers with, like, they want to have a say in the communications platform, and brands aren't often that comfortable in giving control over their messaging. So, you know, it's working really, really closely with insights, with strategy, like giving them the data to feel comfortable making bold creative decisions, and then you get really fun stuff out of it. Those platforms. So
what's interesting, and so Joe, I want to tap you in a second for some of the purchase behavior things, but I also want to bring this up because this goes back to the ad. You know, as you were talking, Graham, I was trying to think to myself, you know, what ads have resonated with me recently, and I realized, I'm like, I don't think I'm being marketed to enough. Which sounds crazy because like we're being overwhelmed with marketing and advertising in this day and age. So it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but I guess what I mean is I don't think I'm being effectively marketed to enough, as in I'm not paying attention to the way in which brands are trying to reach me. But, and maybe this is a bias because obviously Gofundme was on my radar, you know, a week before the webinar, but passing the billboard in the subway and seeing, you know, give them help, it stuck in my mind. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what, wait a second. In general, I think I pay attention to a lot of billboards. I pay attention to out of home because when I am walking, I actually don't walk with my phone. I'm luckily one of those, you know, enjoyable people on the street who won't bump into you because my phone's in my pocket. And as a result, I'm looking around. I like to keep my eyes open. And the curiosity I have is, you know, as folks are sort of clamoring to get outside in many places, and being in Toronto right now, which is where I was born and raised, but I live in New York, I have noticed some different behaviors. You know, in New York, everything's kind of, dare I say it, back to normal, or back to at least it feels normal. I can walk around, do many of the same things, but here, not so much. It still feels, you know, very pandemic-y. And I think that as a result, you know, I'm not spending that much time walking around on the street. I'm not being exposed to as many billboards. I feel like I haven't been marketed to here. And maybe that's what it is. So I wonder if you feel that, with folks really eager to get outside and walk around and maybe be distanced from their phones for a hot second because we associate that with the work that we've been doing or being, sucked into this digital world. If you think that out of home might really, really be increasing, or that there's a huge opportunity there.
I'll jump in on this one briefly. Yeah, we're actually doing out of home for a bunch of clients right now. And it feels like there's a moment to really take advantage of it, because people are you're literally looking around differently for the first time, whereas everything was a beeline before between your work and your office. And but to answer your earlier point about effectiveness of it, I mean, like always, really proud. We were just doing a campaign for Camp Party for one of their brands, and really, you still have to push the messaging. We still had to really be a little bit edgy and get people to pay attention to them. It's not free real estate in the end. So you still have to be creatively effective. And to answer your earlier point about standing out as well, I mean, really, there's so much communications, and it's so hard and so blurry sometimes between influencers and programmatic, that you got to keep doing. I mean, this is age-old agency comment, but one of the things we created for cannabis client we worked for, Fire and Flower, was there's the big NFT rage recently, the non-fungible tokens. So we created the world's first non-fungible toke. So it's a little bit like a glass case toke, and put it on an auction house on Rarible, and someone bid on it and bought it. We donated the money to charity. It's those sorts of simple, but I think like creatively disruptive things that still get attention, and then people talk about it, message us and say, oh my God, I saw the non-fungible token. So that age-old stuff about being brave and trying to stand out applies more than ever, especially I think as money will start to flood into the media system over the next little bit. You could easily just waste your money.
Yeah. Well, if anyone wants me to buy something, feel free to put a billboard in Soho. That's where I'll be. So so, moving on to, okay, so wait, there's a great audience question here. I'm going to save that one for last, because that is a great question I'd like to answer in terms of events. But Joy, I wanted to tap you for this because we talked about this a little bit on Friday when we were prepping. It has to do with purchase behavior. So, I'm really interested in this because I was fascinated by the data that I saw last year when the pandemic started with brand switching. I was so fascinated to see how many consumers were trying new brands and trying new products and engaging in brand switching. So they were, there was product trial, and then if they were able to get, hooked on it, we actually saw significant switching. So we wanted to see what that looked like this year. And of course, this brand switching that occurred has accelerated, and 75% of people are claiming that they're going to continue using the new brands that they had tried last year. And so, so there's a question for you, Joy. How is Edgewell and the portfolio brands under the umbrella, like, Schick, Banana Boat, Playtex, I think you said Hawaiian Tropic, et cetera, looking to sort of deal with this? How are they thinking about it? What does brand switching mean? And, when things change, you want to do things differently, but as things progress, folks might want to move back to that safety. But as Graham mentioned, they've built new habits, they have new products, new safety blankets. But a lot of people have been also economically impacted by COVID, and maybe that's another habit that's been carrying into regular life. And that's what you were talking about, Joy. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, the intersection between new product trial, the kind of changes that are taking place in products that folks are buying, and what might be driving that, from your opinion, in terms of, value consciousness.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things here. I think for sure there's, and your data showed this, I think so many people in this age group had some sort of economic disruption, I'll call it. And, I think just also living through a pandemic and so many of the other things just socially and culturally that were going on at the same time. I think that amongst this audience, what we've noticed is there's just a little bit more of this carpe diem attitude. And it's not sort of flippant, but it's very much like this realization of like, I'm so grateful for what I have. And at the same time, like, you only get one shot at this. Like I'm looking for variety. I'm looking to try new things. that are going to better serve my needs and help me live my best life. And so I think that could be contributing a lot to this brand switching. I think it's not something that's being done flippantly, because what's so interesting and what your data uncovered is that people are sticking with the brands that they're switching to. And so I think it's, something that we see with millennials and Gen Z very specifically are, it's this really interesting mashup of three things, right? Pragmatism, optimism, and individualization are the three sort of pillars that we look at for these audiences. Pragmatism here, I'll say, has a lot to do with having cost-effective offerings for them. I think it's not about being the lowest price. It's really about value and offering something for people who have just possibly gone through like a major economic change or disruption, change of job, back in school, just being in a different position than maybe they were 2 years ago, of really just making sure that the value for the money that you're offering to people is there, no matter what your product is. But they're also looking for optimization, which means, I want it at a great price, but it's also got to have some added value. And I think that that's where another data point that you showed that could be really interesting to lean into is this idea of health consciousness that, we just went through a pandemic. I mean, health and wellness is top of mind. And I think, to optimize the benefit of your product, having some sort of health and wellness benefit layered on to a cost-effective solution, I think is really that intersection for us at Edgewell is very interesting, both for our established brands and also where we're going with new brands.
So I actually love that, because one of the things you said on Friday that has still stuck with me was, you were saying that I think during the pandemic, and we saw this too, we saw that folks, Jamie was presenting earlier and talking a bit about brand switching due to, product availability. So the normal product they buy normally isn't on the shelf. Now, when people decide to switch products, that's actually not the main reason. The main reason is because they're looking for something else. And that's fascinating. Like that's really unique to see. I think it demonstrates an openness, but I think people are looking for more. And this is true across the board. This is true in general with all the activities we're seeing in consumer behavior in general. I think folks are looking for more. They're moving to new places because they're looking for more. They're switching jobs because they're looking for more. They're buying new products because they're looking for more. And I think the brands that will be successful during this time are the ones that are able to satisfy that need for more. And how do we define more? I think it's not necessarily greed. I think it's, it's not more as in volume, quantity. I think it's more as in more meaning, like more something. They're looking for that next level. And I liked what you had said about that many of the products that people tried during the pandemic that were less expensive or more cost effective than the products they may have been buying before, they realized, hey, I can actually find a good dupe. Like, I can find a good knockoff. And it's true. I found this $20, just look for it on Amazon. I'm sure you'll all appreciate this great plug, but there is a vitamin C serum on Amazon that is $20 instead of paying like $180 at Sephora. And it is fantastic. And I'm like, okay, cool. The bottle's not that great. I'll probably put it in a different bottle. Who knows? But it works really well. And I'm really happy with it. And I think that's the unique bit. And we talked a little bit about this intersection between, I think brands need to start thinking about, it's not just about cost effective. It's cost effective, like you said, value, but meeting healthy. I think health is still very, very important. If that vitamin C serum had, a bunch of garbage chemicals in it, which it didn't, because I always check the label, I wouldn't have bought it. It wouldn't be worth, saving money at the expense of my own personal health. So that's a really interesting thing. And I wanted to make sure that we should have shared that with folks. So, before we hand it over, I have one last question. So, Musa, you worked at Nike, Apple, Burberry, Airbnb, now Gofundme. And I recently asked you what you learned, and you gave me an answer that I absolutely love. So do you mind sharing that with everyone?
Yeah, you love it because it's exactly why I love Perksy, but I'll definitely answer. I was basically, and it's timely because someone asked me this question about a month ago, and it actually took me a while to really recognize, right? Like, what makes a great company a great company? And I'm going to answer this in kind of two ways. One is, how do you succeed going into a company, right? I've moved around a lot. That's no secret. Like, how have I found success? The first thing for me is measuring my success, right? Like, coming into an organization, how do you measure success? The CFO knows how to measure financial results, right? They've been doing that for a very long period of time. It's nothing new. But actually, from a brand or marketing perspective, often what you're trying to do is move trust. You're trying to move people's perception of a brand and behavior of a brand. And so the first thing that I do now, and when I come into an organization, is actually sign up to Perksy, because what I do is put out a brand tracker very quickly to basically ask these simple questions, right? What perceptions are there of my brand? What words come to mind when people think about Gofundme? How much do people trust Gofundme? And as you know, we run a brand tracker through Perksy every single 3 months to be able to see that shift move, and hopefully that moves, and therefore I get commended for doing my job. So that's the first thing. And so that's how I'm individually find myself successful in companies. The second thing is in the greatest companies in the world that I've had the opportunity of working in, when we got it right, we were listening to customers. And I know that sounds so obvious, but in this, like, when you're just busy and you're dealing with meetings and you're dealing with boards and you're dealing with bosses, you want presentations and so on, you kind of lose touch of speaking to your customer. And I can tell you, and I maybe go into this in more detail another day, but every single time I've been in a company and we've got a product right, whether that's at Nike or a product at Airbnb or Apple, it's because we were actually listening to our customers. And I think companies who've tried to build innovation hubs and innovation teams, the truth is, like, yes, you can, hire a team of 5 people, 10 people, maybe even 100 people. But, there's millions and millions of people out there who are actually already thinking about innovative ideas your product can go in. And so, one of the things that I really focus my attention on and really spend 25% of my time, and I'd love to spend more on, which has made a big shift in my career, is focused on listening to what customers say, right? Asking questions. And I think, what you undersell Perksy with, and none of you mentioned it, is the speed in which I can get that information over, right? Like, I can have a conversation with my boss within 24 hours, go back to him and say, this is why I think what I was saying makes sense, because customers believe it and we should lean into it. Or alternatively, I don't think we can do that. And so listening, I think, is a thing. And for the people who are listening in today, when was the last time you spoke to your customers? If it was more than 3 months ago, then you're not doing I can guarantee you're not doing a good job. Speak to your customers as often as possible, get as much information from them as possible. They know more about what they want from your product than anyone else. So listening and measuring success, 2 things that Perksy does incredibly well. So thank you, Nadia, for you and the team for producing such a great product, which helps me do my job really well.
Oh, thanks, Musa. That is so nice. I'm glad to hear that. I also think that what's really important is, what we set out to do with Perksy is we actually wanted to connect brands to real people. So our goal wasn't to just build technology, just like build a software and try and go around selling a software. I think companies that are overly focused on that, that's what ends up happening. They sell exclusively a technology or a software. I think our goal is to really sell a connection, and that connection is a brand being able to speak to their consumer, their customer. And that's why we're very, very hyper focused on the audience side. So I'm really glad that's translated well. So thank you. Well, that was all we had time for. Alicia, you're going to be so happy with me because it is 3 p.m. on the dot.
I'm happy with you.
Nailed it.
I'm happy with you regardless, because you always bring some great insights and people to the table here, and we could talk all day about these insights. Our audience, agency marketers, media folks, they want to know. So we are going to share your insights after with our members. We are going to share the video after. If any of you in the audience want to speak with any of our panelists, you can send me an email with any questions, alicia@theadvertisingclub.org. You can find me on our website under contacts. I'll be happy to pass along those questions. Of course, you can also reach out to Jamie and Nadia at Perksy for more information. This is one of many conversations we're having. Stay tuned to the Advertising Club for more. For the speakers here today, stay involved. We have platforms for you. And we hope to see our audience and all of you in person at our events coming up in the next few months. Please stay healthy, stay safe, and stay connected. Thanks everybody for being here
Thank
today.
you so much, everyone.
All right,
Thanks for
take
joining,
care.
Graham, Musa, Joy.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye all.